The bullet tore through Kessler's shoulder, just as the first orange tongues licked at the barn's weathered planks. He stumbled, his boots sliding on blood-soaked earth, watching everything he'd built over 15 years transform into a hellish inferno. The rustlers were gone, but they'd left their calling card, death and destruction, painted across the Montana sky. "Help me," a voice whispered from the smoke. Kessler spun, his injured arm hanging useless, and saw her, a woman in a torn black dress, her auburn hair singed, cradling something against her chest. Ember light danced across her soot-streaked face as she stumbled toward him through the burning wreckage. "My husband," she gasped, her green eyes wild with grief. "They shot him when he tried to protect the horses. He's gone." The woman collapsed to her knees, and Kessler saw what she held, a bloodied wedding ring, still warm from a dead man's finger. Around them, the ranch house groaned as flames consumed its frame, sending sparks spiraling into the star-drunk sky. "We need to move," Kessler said, though his voice felt distant, dreamlike. The pain in his shoulder was nothing compared to the hollow ache in his chest as he watched his life's work crumble. "The whole place is going up." She looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them, two souls stripped raw. By loss, finding recognition, and shared devastation. Her name was Cordelia, she told him, as they fled the burning ranch. She and her husband had been traveling through when the attack began. They took shelter in a cave 3 miles north where Cordelia's surprisingly steady hands cleaned and bandaged Kessler's wound by moonlight. Neither spoke of the dead, her husband lying cold in the ashes, or the 3 ranch hands Kessler had buried just that morning. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken understanding. Cordelia asked, her fingers gentle on his fevered skin. "Would you have?" She met his eyes, and in them he saw the same stubborn fire that had kept him fighting even as his world burned. "No," she whispered. "I wouldn't have." As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, they stood together on the ridge watching smoke curl from the blackened skeleton of what had been the Moonrise Ranch. Kessler's cattle were scattered or dead, his buildings reduced to charcoal and memory. Cordelia clutched her husband's ring, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "I have nothing left," she said. "Neither do I." Kessler's voice was rough as sandpaper. "We're still breathing." Something shifted in the air between them, not love, not yet. The first tentative recognition that survival might be possible. That from complete destruction, something new could grow. The morning wind carried the scent of ash and wildflowers, and for the first time since the shooting began, Kessler felt hope stir in his chest like a bird testing damaged wings. 3 weeks later, Kessler's shoulder had healed enough for him to swing an axe, though the deeper wounds remained raw. He and Cordelia had built a rough shelter in the cave, surviving on rabbits he trapped and berries she gathered. They moved around each other with careful politeness, 2 strangers bound by catastrophe. "You don't have to stay," Kessler said one evening, as they shared a meager dinner of roasted meat and wild onions. "Town's only a day's ride. You could catch the next stage east." Cordelia's hands stilled on the wooden bowl she was carving. "Is that what you want?" The question hung between them like smoke. What he wanted was complicated: to touch her face, to learn the sound of her laughter, to wake up beside her when the nightmares came. But desire felt like betrayal when her husband's blood still stained her wedding dress. "I want to rebuild," he said finally. "But it won't be easy. It's years of work and no guarantee of success. I'm not afraid of work." She set down the bowl and looked at him directly. "I'm afraid of being alone." That night, she told him about her marriage arranged by her father to a man 20 years her senior who treated her like expensive furniture. About the baby she'd lost, the silence that had grown between them like a chasm. Her husband had been kind but distant, and she'd mourned him more from duty than love. "I feel guilty," she whispered, "that I don't grieve him more, that I can sit here with you and feel ... alive." "Guilt's a luxury we can't afford," Kessler said. "The dead don't need our tears as much as the living need our hope." By day, they worked side by side, clearing the burned timbers and salvaging what they could. Cordelia proved surprisingly strong, her soft hands growing calloused as she hauled stone and split wood. In the evenings, they talked by the fire about books she'd read, places he'd traveled, dreams they'd both abandoned. The first time he kissed her, it was accidental, a collision as they both reached for the same piece of salvaged iron. Her lips were warm and tasted of wood smoke and wild honey. They pulled apart quickly, both breathing hard. "We shouldn't," she said, but her eyes said otherwise. "No," he agreed and kissed her again. That night, they made love in the cave, desperate and tender. Two people grasping for warmth in the darkness. Afterward, she lay against his chest, tracing the scar on his shoulder with her fingertip. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered. "Like what? Like I was drowning and you pulled me from the water?" In the morning, they began laying the foundation for a new house, not where the old one had stood, but on higher ground, facing the sunrise. It would be smaller, simpler, but it would be theirs. As they worked, Cordelia hummed softly, and Kessler realized he was building more than a home. He was building a life, a future, a love born from ashes and tempered by loss. The rustlers returned on a Tuesday, just as Kessler was raising the frame for the new barn. 6 men on horseback, led by a scarred giant named Vance, who'd made his reputation stealing cattle and burning homesteads across 3 territories. "Heard you were dead, cowboy," Vance called out, his voice carrying across the half-built ranch. Seems reports were exaggerated. Kessler stepped protectively in front of Cordelia, his hand moving to the Colt at his hip. "You got what you came for. Move on." "See, that's where you're wrong." Vance spat tobacco juice and grinned, revealing gold teeth. "We came for the land. Nice water rights, good grass. Perfect for our operation. This land's not for sale." "Said anything about buying?" The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Kessler counted cartridges in his head, 6 shots against 6 men. Not good odds, but he'd faced worse. Behind him, he heard Cordelia's sharp intake of breath. "Give us the woman," Vance continued, "and we'll make it quick. She's pretty enough to fetch a good price in Mexico." Something cold and deadly settled in Kessler's chest. That'll be the day. The shooting started when one of Vance's men got impatient and reached for his gun. Kessler's first shot took him clean through the chest, spinning him from his saddle. The second caught another rustler in the shoulder. But then Cordelia screamed his name. Vance had circled around behind the half-built barn, his rifle trained on them both. "Drop it, cowboy, or I'll put a bullet in your lady friend." Kessler's hand froze on his gun. Time seemed to slow as he calculated angles and distances. Then Cordelia did something that surprised them. She laughed. "You think I'm helpless? Because I'm a woman?" She stepped out from behind Kessler, her dead husband's derringer gleaming in her hand. "I've been practicing." Hush. Her shot took Vance in the throat, dropping him like a stone. The remaining rustlers, seeing their leader dead and 2 of their number down, decided discretion was the better part of valor and rode hard for the hills. Later, as they buried the bodies in the hard Montana soil, Cordelia was quiet. When Kessler asked if she was all right, she shook her head. "I never killed anyone before," she said. "It doesn't feel the way I thought it would." "How does it feel?" "Empty, like something broke inside me." Kessler pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Sometimes breaking is the only way. To heal properly, like a bone that's set wrong has to be broken again to mend right." That night she cried in his arms, mourning not just the man she'd killed, but the innocence she'd lost. When her tears were spent, they made love with fierce tenderness, as if trying to burn away the darkness with their passion. "Promise me something," she whispered against his skin. "Anything. Promise me we'll build something beautiful here, something that makes all this pain worth it." "I promise," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. By autumn, the new ranch house stood complete, modest but sturdy, with a wide porch facing the mountains and windows positioned to catch the morning light. Cordelia had insisted on a large kitchen, and Kessler had built her a pantry bigger than most folks' entire homes. "Planning to feed an army?" he'd teased. But she'd just smiled mysteriously and run her hands over the smooth pine shelves. The cattle were thriving on the winter grass. and Kessler had hired two Hands brothers named Pike and Donovan who drifted up from Texas with honest faces and strong backs. They were building something real, something lasting. It was Pike who rode in with the news that changed everything. "Riders coming," he called out, spurring his horse toward the house. "Looks like law, eh?" The sheriff was a thin man named Garrett, with intelligent eyes and a badge that actually meant something. With him rode a federal marshal and a woman in traveling clothes who made Cordelia go pale as morning frost. "Ma'am," the woman said, dismounting gracefully, "I'm Vivian Ashford from the Pinkerton Agency. We need to discuss your late husband." Kessler felt the world tilt sideways. What about him? "He wasn't just a traveler," Vivian explained, her voice clinical. "He was a federal agent investigating a counterfeiting ring. When he was killed, he was carrying evidence that could break the case wide open." Cordelia's hand found Kessler's, squeezing tight. "I don't understand." "Your husband hid documents somewhere before he died. We need to find them." They spent the next 3 days turning the ranch upside down, searching through every salvageable piece of debris from the fire. It was Cordelia who finally found them hidden in the false bottom of a jewelry box that had somehow survived the flames. "He never told me," she said, staring at the papers as if they might bite her. "All those years of marriage, and he never told me who he really was." The documents revealed a network of counterfeiters operating out of Denver using stolen cattle. As cover for their operations, Vance and his men had been part of it, which explained why they'd been so desperate to claim the land. "This testimony will put away some very dangerous people," Marshal Garrett said, "but it also means you might be in danger. They'll know the evidence came from here." That night, Kessler and Cordelia sat on their porch watching the stars emerge over the mountains. The future they'd been building suddenly felt fragile as spun glass. "We could run," she said quietly. "Change our names. Start over somewhere else. Is that what you want?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I want to stay and fight. This is our home now, our life. I won't let them take it from us." "Then we stay," Kessler said, and kissed her temple. "Whatever comes, we face it together." As if summoned by their words, a sound echoed across the valley hoofbeats, coming fast. They weren't alone in the darkness. Whatever was coming would test everything they'd built together. The counterfeiting ring struck at dawn with 20 men surrounding the ranch house in a carefully planned assault. But Kessler and Cordelia were ready. They'd spent the night preparing, turning their home into a fortress. "You sure about this?" Kessler asked, checking his rifle one final time. "I've never been more sure of anything," Cordelia replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her. "Hands, this is our stand." The attack came from 3 sides simultaneously. Pike and Donovan held the barn, their rifles speaking in deadly rhythm. Kessler covered the front approach while Cordelia watched the back. Her shooting improved dramatically since that first desperate encounter with Vance. "Surrender the woman and the documents," called out a voice from the tree line. "You're outnumbered 4-1. "Come and take them!" Kessler shouted back. And put a bullet through the hat of a man foolish enough to show himself. The battle raged for 3 hours. Smoke filled the air as bullets chewed through the wooden walls of the house. Cordelia moved. Like a dancer, reloading weapons and passing ammunition, her black dress torn and stained with gunpowder. "Left window," she called out, and Kessler spun to see an attacker trying to climb through. His shot took the man in the chest, sending him tumbling backward. But the odds were telling. Pike took a bullet in the leg, and Donovan's rifle jammed at the worst possible moment. They were running low on ammunition, and their attackers seemed endless. The back door, Cordelia gasped, blood running from a graze on her cheek. "They're coming through the back door." Kessler spun to see 3 men bursting into their kitchen. His first shot dropped one, but the others kept coming. Everything slowed as he saw the muzzle flash, saw Cordelia throw herself between him and the bullets. "No." The word tore from his throat as she crumpled. Something primal and terrible awakened in Kessler then. He moved like a man possessed, his Colt speaking death in measured cadences. The 2 remaining attackers fell, but more were coming. "Cordelia," he whispered, gathering her into his arms. Blood soaked her dress, but her eyes were still fierce. The documents, she gasped. Don't let them. Don't let it all be for nothing. You're not dying on me, he said fiercely. Not today. I love you, she whispered, and then her eyes closed. The rage that filled Kessler was biblical in its scope. He laid her gently on the kitchen floor, kissed her forehead, and walked out. To meet his enemies? He had 2 bullets left, and 20 men still surrounded his home. But as he stepped onto the porch, the thunder of hoofbeats echoed from the east. Marshal Garrett led a cavalry charge that swept through the attackers like the wrath of God. The counterfeiting ring had made their last mistake. They'd brought a war to Montana. And Montana was fighting back. When the smoke cleared, Kessler knelt beside Cordelia's still form, her blood staining his hands. The documents were safe. The criminals were dead or captured, but the cost felt too high to bear. She's not dead, Dr. Morrison said, his voice cutting through Kessler's despair like a blade. Close, but not dead. The old physician had ridden out with the cavalry, and his steady hands worked over Cordelia's still form for what felt like hours. The bullet had missed her heart by inches, but she'd lost dangerous amounts of blood. Will she live? Kessler asked, his voice hoarse from shouting and smoke. That depends on her. I've done what I can. The rest is up to her fighting spirit. For 3 days, Cordelia lay unconscious, while Kessler maintained a vigil beside her bed. He talked to her constantly about the ranch, about their plans, about the future they'd build together. Pike and Donovan, both wounded but recovering, took turns sitting with him. She's tougher than she looks, Pike said on the second day. Saw her put 3 shots through a silver dollar at 50 yards yesterday. She's got something to fight for, Donovan added. That counts for a lot. On the 4th morning, Cordelia's eyes fluttered open. Did we win? She whispered. We won, Kessler said, tears streaming down his face. We won everything. Her recovery was slow, but steady. Within a week, she was sitting up and arguing with Dr. Morrison about his restrictions. Within 2 weeks, she was walking carefully around the house, inspecting the repairs and planning improvements. We need a bigger barn, she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. And maybe a garden, something beautiful, to balance all the ugliness we've seen. Whatever you want, Kessler said, his arm around her shoulders. We've got time now. The trial of the counterfeiting ring made headlines across the territory. Cordelia's testimony, delivered from a wheelchair due to her injuries, helped put away 14 criminals, including the mastermind who'd ordered the attack on their ranch. Justice served, Marshal Garrett said afterward, but Kessler knew the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the life they were building together, one day at a time. As autumn turned to winter, the ranch prospered. The cattle grew fat on the good grass, and neighbors began stopping by to trade news and supplies. Cordelia's cooking became legendary, and their home became a gathering place for the scattered community. I never thought I'd have this, she said one snowy evening, watching Kessler repair tack by the fire. A real home, a real love. We earned it, he replied, setting down his work to pull her close. Every scar, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, we earned this. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, but inside their home, warmth and love held back the darkness. They'd found each other in the ashes, and from that destruction had built something beautiful and enduring. Spring came early to the Montana territory, and with it, news that would change everything. Cordelia stood in the kitchen, her hands pressed to her still flat belly, watching Kessler through the window as he worked with the new horses. I'm with child, she said, when he came in for lunch, the words tumbling out like water over stones. Kessler went perfectly still, his hat in his hands. Are you certain? Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday. She searched his face anxiously. Are you pleased? Instead of answering, he swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen until she laughed and protested. Pleased? I'm over the moon. The baby was born on a crisp October morning, with Dr. Morrison attending and Pike pacing nervously outside. She was perfect tiny fists and a lusty cry that announced her arrival to the world. What shall we call her? Kessler asked, cradling his daughter with surprising gentleness. Hope, Cordelia said without hesitation. Her name is Hope. The ranch continued to prosper. They added a second barn, expanded the house, and took on more hands as the cattle. Herds grew. Cordelia's garden bloomed with vegetables and flowers, creating an oasis of beauty in the harsh landscape. Pike married a school teacher from town. They built a small house on the eastern edge of the property. Donovan found love with a widow, who ran the general store, and suddenly the ranch felt like the heart of a growing community. Remember when we thought we had nothing? Cordelia said one evening, as they sat on the porch watching Hope take her first wobbly steps across the yard. We had each other, Kessler replied. That was never nothing. No, she agreed, leaning against his shoulder. That was everything. As the years passed, their love only deepened. They added 2 more children, a son they named Justice, and another daughter called Grace. The ranch became the largest in the territory. But they never forgot their humble beginnings or the darkness they'd overcome. On their 10th anniversary, Kessler found Cordelia in the garden, her hair now streaked with silver, her hands still gentle as she tended the roses. Any regrets? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Only one, she said, melting back against him.
Ow.
That we didn't find each other sooner. We found each other when we needed to, he said. When we were ready to build something real. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, their children played in the yard while their parents held each other close. From the ashes of destruction, they'd built not just a ranch, but a dynasty, a love story that would be told for generations. The wounded cowboy and the lost widow had found each other in the darkness, and together they'd created light. Their love had been forged in fire and tempered by loss, making it stronger than steel and more precious than gold. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the pain they'd endured or the battles they'd won, but the life they'd built together. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one love at a time, forever and always, until the mountains crumbled and the stars fell from the sky.